world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Friday, March 27th, as I am recording this. Now, we're getting to it a lot later in the day than I had initially planned. And a lot of this podcast is going to be about yesterday's disastrous 3-hour plus cabinet meeting. There was a lot to touch on there. But you might have noticed the last couple days there were not podcasts up. And obviously life and work got in the way. Doing my best to stay ahead of the game and try to stay on track for a daily show. And now I don't know if it's going to stay, but at least my schedule for the next week or so is looking a little better as far as being able to manage that daily show. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to where I'm recording the following day's podcast the night before. That way it's up and ready to go for you. Now, I talked about this cabinet meeting, and Donald Trump loves these 3-hour cabinet meetings. Now, why do they do these big televised cabinet meetings? Well, they're doing it because Donald Trump is wanting to show his fitness for the office. He thinks it somehow proves that he is competent, that he is healthy, that he is in better shape than Joe Biden ever was. Because we never saw cabinet meetings. We didn't hear about cabinet meetings. And there were claims by Republicans that Joe Biden never had cabinet meetings, that he just didn't do it. So they decided to try to prove that Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. It's all about Donald Trump's ego. It's a pissing contest. As most things when it comes to Donald Trump are. But he does these meetings to try to prove that he's in some kind of perfect shape, that he's got the body and the mind of, somebody 20 years younger. And what we see is actually a stark reality that's very, very different. Now, Donald Trump comes out, does this cabinet meeting, and it does appear yet again that he fell asleep. And the simple fact of the matter is, when it comes to Donald Trump's health, it is very apparent, at least to me, and I am not a medical expert. We've been over this. No, I don't play one on TV, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But it is very evident to me that Donald Trump is sundowning. And I see other medical experts talk about his sundowning, and it's getting worse day by day. He is up a fair chunk of the night, posting on Truth Social, sharing random things. And some nights, if his brain is really going, he's firing off faster than one or two posts a minute. And it just shows how far the decline has come. And in years to come, this presidency is going to be studied. Like his presidency for both terms, the intervening 4 years, and the aftermath of his presidency will be studied by historians because of how bad of his term has been. But not only that, how people could see with their own eyes how bad off physically and mentally he was. And still a section of this country voted for him. So what did they cover in this meeting? Well, they covered a lot. And one of the things, is it Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary, was talking at one point, and they were talking about Venezuela. And, of course, they were talking about all the positives from the regime change in Venezuela. Well, first of all, there was no regime change in Venezuela. That was something made up by Donald Trump. And the reason I say that is because, yes, they went in, they captured Maduro. He is currently in a U.S. prison, and he is going to be tried in U.S. courts for some charges. Okay. Yeah, they did that. But if it was a true regime change, then somebody else, another party, would have been made president of Venezuela. But that's not what happened. You see, Donald Trump just allowed, in part because he is the president of the United States, not the president of the world. But two, because they only went after Maduro, they didn't stop his VP, Delcy Rodriguez, from becoming president of Venezuela. And all of the cabinet and everybody around Maduro was left in place. So it wasn't really a regime change. But Donald Trump wants to claim it is because he knows it makes it look better for him. And Doug Burgum was talking about the regime change, and he was saying that how good the Venezuelans think of Donald Trump and how much they appreciate him for doing what they did. And they were comparing him to, and he got the name wrong, but I think he was trying to talk about Oscar. I think it's Oscar Bolivier. I think he was the one who helped unify South America to get them their freedom from Spain. And he was talking about Donald Trump and said, yeah, though they love him in Venezuela, they're talking about building a statue of him. And he went on, was talking about some more things. And he says, well, yeah, since Donald Trump took over, they've upped their oil production 50%. All of that goes straight to the United States. And that just means, it's going to help lower oil prices. And as he's in the middle of saying that, Donald Trump chimes in, forget about that. When are they building the statue? And Jesus Christ, Donald Trump comes right out and says, forget about the fact that, Venezuela is producing more oil, which should help lower gas prices. All he heard was statue in his honor, and that's all he cared about. This is who Donald Trump is. He is a raging narcissist who ultimately only cares about himself. He doesn't care about the American people, not in the least. So, and there was no answer as to when there was going to be a statue. There's not going to be a statue to Donald Trump. But see, that's what he cares about. He cares about the awards and the honors. Speaking of awards, I'm going to venture away from the cabinet meeting for half a second, but the Republican National Committee, or the Republican National Party anyway, came up with this America First Award, something like that. And it's a little gold statuette thing. And they presented it to Donald Trump as the inaugural winner. Now, of course, Donald Trump is cheering, oh, I got another prize. Here, and one of the rules of this is that Donald Trump, from now on, will get to decide who wins it every year. Well, we know who Donald Trump is going to decide how he's going to decide that. He's going to say, I win it every year because, oh, yeah, I'm doing everything that's America first. But yet, he's not doing things that are America first. Going into Venezuela, disrupting their regime, and putting boots on the ground, spending money on the military to do all of that just for the same people minus Maduro to be in power is not America first. And then we were just talking about how when he was told how good the fact that they were producing more oil could be for Americans, he goes, forget that. When are they building my statue? Now, some people will say, well, he was joking. But Donald Trump doesn't have a sense of humor. We've seen this time and time and time again. Donald Trump does not joke. When he is supposedly joking, typically, or what he thinks is joking, a lot of times, is just downright mean and cruel. He's your typical narcissistic bully. He's the guy who in high school just picked on a certain group of people just because they were smart, just because things came naturally better to them. Donald Trump would pick on them, and he never outgrew that. A lot of high school bullies eventually change. They see the error of their ways, or at least they grow up a little bit. And even if they don't understand or see the error of what they were doing, they've at least come to a point when they don't need to do it for their own self-worth, and they find things that actually make them happy. But Donald Trump doesn't find many things that make him happy. So yeah, Donald Trump is focused on this statue. He's not America first. He got sidetracked during the meeting talking about oil prices and Venezuela getting more oil production. And then he's like, well, you guys said there was going to be a statue of him. When's the statue? And that's all he could think about, right? And that now you have this other prize coming from the Republican National Party, this America First prize I was talking about. All this stuff it's distractions, right? You're keeping Grandpa busy while his dementia is raging, because those are the comfort things that keep him occupied and keep him from lashing out, being violent, while he's not necessarily grounded in reality anymore. Now, one of the things we've been hearing about this Iran war, first of all, Donald Trump doesn't have an exit strategy. He doesn't know how to get out of it. He doesn't know what the plan is. He says that they're going to be done sometime soon. Of course, he made it sound like when he told General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Pete Hegseth, he's like, well, unfortunately, I think we're going to be done with this here soon. And he made it sound like they were out to be more for the war and things like that. And that might be true, at least on the part of Hegseth. They don't have an exit strategy. They don't. We find out Donald Trump doesn't entirely even know what's going on. They're not fully briefing him. In fact, we find out that effectively they are showing him TikToks about the war. They're showing him 2 to 3 minute highlight clips of the United States blowing up things in the Middle East, in Iran. And he's loving every minute of it. They're not showing him the counterstrikes, not really. They're telling him bits and pieces about, like, well, yeah, they closed the Strait of Hormuz and things like that. But they're not telling him everything because they can't. They can't keep him to get him to focus on it, and they have to show him things that he enjoys. And well, he is liking all of the destruction in Iran. Now, the other day, I did a TikTok talking about how Donald Trump is chickening out about this war. He came out and he originally gave them 2 days to open the Strait of Hormuz, or we would obliterate them, the likes of which you have never seen. And then he came out and he said, well, he was talking to somebody in Iran, and that they were so close on negotiations and they were having such good talks that he was going to give them another 5 days. Well, as part of this cabinet meeting, they turned around and they said, or he said, well, they did such a good job. They've given me a gift like never before, and now he's backed out. He wants to give them another 10 before he launches a full scale thing. Well, what gift did he get? And, most people were confused because even the aides around him were like, well, haven't gotten anything official from Iran. What gift was it? What could we have possibly gotten? Well, turns out what they got is he saw a video of oil tankers flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. And he thought that that was such a good thing. Oh, yeah, Iran's backing off. They're going to start letting oil flow through the strait. It's going to be great. Gas prices are going to start coming back down. It's going to help everybody out. Except that's not what happened. Yes, oil tankers were flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, but they were Pakistani. It was oil already bought, heading to Pakistan, not heading to anywhere that is going to benefit the United States in any way, shape, or form. And basically, what Iran has already said is that they'll let almost any ship through the Strait of Hormuz as long as they're not benefiting Israel or the United States. It's not going to affect world gas prices. But see, Donald Trump saw something that looked like what he had wanted to see, which was Iran backing down. And he called it a great gift and was willing to back off on everything else he was doing for the foreseeable future. He's like, well, we're gonna give him another 10 days. I think he's just looking for a way out. He doesn't know how to get out of this at this point. He doesn't know how to stop the hostilities. And he thinks at some point he's going to just be able to say, oh, yeah, we've come to such a deal. We've come to a great deal and everything is fine. And Iran agrees and we've got a ceasefire. There's a problem with that. That only works if Iran actually agrees. Iran's saying we haven't talked to anybody in this administration. And they're not going to accept Donald Trump just backing off. They have some conditions they want, at least for the last I saw. What they want involves the removal of Netanyahu at the head of Israel. I believe they may want Donald Trump to be removed as president and held accountable. I think they want Netanyahu at least, and maybe Donald Trump, turned over to the International Criminal Court for war crimes trials. And they want guarantees that these things would never happen again, among other things. Now, Donald Trump is never going to agree to any sort of a deal that puts him in harm's way, especially one that may lead him into some kind of an imprisonment. That's just not who Donald Trump is. One of the things that scares him the most, and one of the reasons as to why he keeps talking about getting reelected and running for a third term, etc., and why he even ran for president this last time, was to stay out of prison. Donald Trump had heard that there were investigations into him, and he has this delusion, and the Supreme Court, for whatever reason, sided with him and said that he had immunity while president for certain things. So he thinks that as long as he is president, he can't be charged or tried or anything for anything he has done ever in his life. In part, that's the dementia. Part of it's the narcissism, and part of it is just very much hopeful thinking on his part, because he is terrified of what's to come. Donald Trump does not want to deal with the thought of dealing with a closing jail cell. So he says that Iran has, been negotiating, but Iran says not happening. I believe Iran in this situation over Donald Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump has been known to lie. He says a lot of things, they come out to be not true, and then his party has to turn around and try to defend him. His supporters try to defend him or come out and say, well, what he really meant was, or he didn't mean that, or no, he never said it. And you can even play the clips of him saying that, and it becomes, a whole situation where the Republicans will defend it and say, well, that's just AI. or that's a deep fake, or it's something, right? Our friend Mike the Rational Boomer likes this analogy, and I'm going to steal it for a minute. And he talks about how it was watching wrestling in the 70s and the 80s, and they would show a clip from a previous television taping, and whatever wrestler would say, they doctored the footage, even back before that was even a thing that could really be easily done. And that's effectively how Donald Trump and his supporters act when he's caught on camera actually saying something. When they're caught because Donald Trump has done or said something that is completely and totally ridiculous. Now, as part of this cabinet meeting, I was talked about how he has said that Iran is close to a deal. Well, that really isn't a thing. And there was no real gift. Like I said, it was something he saw and he thought something positive, and he's trying to spin it and call it a gift. And that's in part, I think that's his dementia, filling in the gaps and trying to make sense out of the chaos of everything that is going on. Now, as part of this cabinet meeting, and I'm trying to remember everything I was talking about when it came to this cabinet meeting, but he comes out and he says that he was talking to Russell Vought of Project 2025 fame, and they were talking specifically about the tariffs. And he was talking about two of the places that he hates the most, Minnesota and California. And he hates both of them because they dared to vote against him. California, because he really believed going into the 2024 election. He believed his own hype. He believed the fake polls that people were feeding him. And they were playing a bunch of things, right? Like he believed it all, and he thought he had a chance to flip California. And then California, as expected, went Democrat. Same with Minnesota. And he's never forgiven either one of them because he views that as a slight against him. Donald Trump wanted payback. But he was said at this cabinet meeting, he was talking to Russell Vought, and he said, when it comes to California and to Minnesota, just don't pay them. These judges are ruining this country. Just ignore it. Now, what was he talking about? He was talking about the Supreme Court decision on repaying the tariffs. Now, he is supposed to have already repaid the tariff money, and apparently it is getting something up to something like, I think it's $1 billion almost a week in penalties and interest for every week they don't repay all of the tariff money to the companies that paid it in. And he basically said, yeah, we're not doing that. Now, that's typical Donald Trump. He doesn't pay his bills. This is the man who bankrupted like 4 casinos. Everything he has touched has went belly up. Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump University, Trump Charities, 4 casinos, the Trump Taj Mahal. Everything he touches goes belly up. And now he is telling Russell Vought, at least, that the Treasury should not pay this tariff money. And the courts need to be looking at that. He's publicly saying, just defy court orders. Now, if this was a Democrat, if this was Joe Biden, they'd be talking about impeachment. They'd be talking about removing him. But the thing is, the Democrats would be the ones talking about it with Republicans supporting it. In this case, the Republicans aren't even talking about it. Once again, when it comes to all of it, it is just business as usual. Donald Trump can say or do whatever he wants for the most part, and the Republicans just accept it. He comes out and he says something like, well, we just won't pay him. Again, he's openly defying court orders. Now, why do the Republicans just let him do all of this stuff, and why aren't they pushing back? It's because they've got a math problem. They are staring at the 2026 midterm elections, and there's about 30% of the Republican Party that will always side with Donald Trump. Okay? And what they're doing is they're playing the math game going, yeah, if we side with Donald Trump, that 30% is going to continue to vote for us. Okay? They haven't figured out how to reach that 30% while not being sided to Donald Trump. The thing is, they are turning away their own parties. They are losing their own voters, and they don't even realize it, or if they do, they don't have a plan forward. Now, we talked earlier this week about the special election in Florida where 2 state districts had flipped, one of them being the home of Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach. Now, there's something interesting I didn't know at the time we talked about it last. When Palm Beach flipped for the Democrat, okay, it wasn't just that more Democrats turned up to vote, although that is part of it. There were more registered Republicans that voted in this election, but yet the Democrat won. What does that mean? That means Republicans are voting across party lines, and they voted for the Democrat. And when I say more registered Republicans, I am meaning not just more than Democrats, because there were more Republicans that voted than Democrats registered, but more registered Republicans voted than the Republican candidate actually received. And that makes part of the difference, right? Now, some of the Republicans are going to cry foul and fraud and all of these things, because certain people in the Republican Party can't imagine a scenario where a registered Republican would turn around and vote for anybody but a Republican. Why? Because they view politics like football, right? They view it like, and I'm going to pick on a couple of teams. If you're a Cowboys fan or you're an Alabama fan, right? That, why would you ever cheer for the other party unless it somehow helps you out in the long run? Like when you're cheering for, if you're a Cowboys fan and you got a chance to make the playoffs, but it requires another team to get beat, you're cheering for the team that's playing the team that you need to lose, right? And that's how they treat politics. They view it very much like their favorite team wins. They don't always pay attention to what their own team and what their side is doing. They heard Donald Trump say a lot of the things he was going to do this administration, and now that he is doing them and they are coming back to bite Republicans, they're going, I never knew they were going to do that to us. I didn't know. Well, how didn't you know? The Republicans told us everything that was going on. So Donald Trump is telling people to defy court orders, right? Republicans should be nervous by him doing that. Kind of got off on a tangent there, but they should be nervous. And they're not going against him because, as we were just talking about, they're worried about that 30% of the MAGA base. And Donald Trump also comes out in this cabinet meeting, right? And he says he is going to order the new head of the Department of Homeland Security to pay TSA workers because TSA is not currently getting paid. Now, they're not getting paid because for the past 5 to 6 weeks, there has been a partial government shutdown, specifically only dealing with DHS. Now, Democrats want a couple of things when it comes to this government shutdown or the shutdown of DHS. And that is they want ICE and Border Patrol to not wear masks in public, which it's funny that the groups that are now wearing masks were the ones that had so many problems wearing masks in public during COVID when it was helping to stop the spread of a very infectious new disease. And we were trying to make sure that people didn't get sick and die. But anyway, they want ICE agents and Border Patrol to not wear masks in public, to have displayed visible badges, to have to wear body cams and have those body cams be on and recording the whole time they are on duty, to stop the roving raids to where they are just wandering through town, basically going up to random houses and going into just, well, today we're going to go hit Home Depot, or today we're going to go hit Lowe's, or today we're going to wander into Target, and we're going to conduct immigration enforcement at these businesses while people are trying to work and do their job. And we have no reason to believe there's anybody there, but we're going to go look and make sure anyway. Right? They want all of these things to stop. They want ICE to use judicial warrants, not administrative. An administrative warrant is one where basically their superiors say, yeah, go do it. That doesn't make it legal. A judicial warrant is one where you take evidence to a judge and the judge goes, yeah, you got probable cause to go arrest this person. You can go arrest them. And if you need to break down their front door to go do it, you can do that. Or you can go detain them, or you can search their property, or whatever you're trying to do. If a judge signs off on it, you actually have the authority. These administrative warrants are really dubious at best. So Donald Trump says he is going to pay TSA. This comes after we've seen videos of ICE agents at TSA checkpoints supposedly helping. But realistically, what they're doing is, from what I've seen, they've been running away, some of them, from people trying to record who they are because they're not wearing masks. They've been handing out water bottles. And I don't know what the deal is with the water bottles. I am seeing some creators saying that if you're in line with TSA and you get handed a water bottle by ICE, not to drink it. I don't know if I haven't heard any reports of anything negative happening because of it, or if it is just a fundamental screw you to the government by saying, well, yeah, we'll take the water bottle, but we're not going to actually use it and just cost you that money. I don't know. I don't know what's up with that, but I'm seeing creators saying that. But TSA is really not getting a lot of help from ICE, and there are very, very long lines here. So Donald Trump says he is going to order Markwayne Mullin, the new head of DHS, who just got confirmed this week, to pay TSA. Can he do that? Not really. Now, the way I understand it, he may be able to temporarily move some money around from one department to another. Even that's dubious at best because Congress controls the power of the purse. And technically, if you want to get technical, when it comes to DHS funding right now, Congress has said we are authorizing $0 right now for anything because they have not approved any funding to pay workers. Now, what I'm hearing they're talking about doing is taking some of the money out of the ICE budget that was appropriated through the One Big Beautiful Bill and moving it over to pay TSA. Again, not 100% sure that is legal. But this is what happens. See, Donald Trump comes out. He's directly the cause of TSA not getting paid. And he goes ahead, now he creates a solution. Well, I'm going to tell him to pay you anyway. So then he thinks he looks like the hero. He's part of the reason as to why TSA and stuff have not been paid. Multiple times there has been talks, bipartisan talks, that they would turn around and they would fund DHS everything except for Border Patrol and ICE, because those are the departments that are having problems. And Donald Trump has refused. He has said, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to do that. And he's even before said he's not signing any DHS funding package unless the SAVE Act is attached. So he's got a real problem here. He created the problem with DHS because he let ICE run amok. They're doing whatever he wants, and he loves the chaos, he loves the violence, and he loves all of it. And now all of that's happening, and yet he wants to look like the hero for saying that he's getting them paid. Now, Donald Trump, during this cabinet meeting, and he again tried another attempt at a joke. I don't know that I've got all of these things in the right order as to when they actually happened. All right, but he got a lot of nervous laughter out of the crowd as he said, well, I've got to keep my plans for, I think he was talking about Iran, but I got to keep my plans close to my vest because, if I told you what I was going to do, they'd have to use the 25th Amendment on me. Right? He'd have to use what's it called? And then I think it was Marco Rubio said the 25th Amendment. Donald Trump couldn't even remember what he was talking about. And, I'm sure some of the MAGAs, if they watch this, they're going to say, well, you just forgot. Yeah, but I'm not president of the United States. And I'm doing a lot of this off of memory from the articles I have read. I don't have cheat sheets and I don't have notes in front of me. And I have never once claimed to be the smartest person in the room. There have been a lot of times where, yes, I might have actually been the smartest person in that room. But I don't claim it because I'm not a narcissist. Now, Donald Trump is making jokes about them having to use the 25th Amendment. But there was a lot of nervous laughter. Now, I've been thinking about that nervous laughter, and I believe what I said about it on my TikToks was that they were laughing because they couldn't tell if he was joking. They weren't sure exactly what he meant by, his actual plans because, he says he can't tell everybody because they would invoke the 25th. And I think there are actually conversations going on behind closed doors. We've talked about it before. Remember, Representative Don Bacon of Omaha, Nebraska, a Republican, said when Donald Trump was talking about putting boots on the ground in Greenland that if he decided to do that, that they had the votes to impeach and remove him. And I think that Congress is having these discussions, but I think so is the cabinet with J.D. Vance. Now, to utilize the 25th Amendment, what would they have to do? Well, it would take the entirety of or it would take the majority of the cabinet anyway, and the vice president going to Congress and saying, this dude's not fit. Okay. They come through, they say he's not fit, and then they go to Congress. Congress would have to pass, and they would have to vote on it. Okay. Congress votes on whether or not he's fit for office. And if I believe it's 2/3 of both chambers agree that he's not fit, either permanently or temporarily, then either he would be temporarily removed and all powers would go to J.D. Vance, or he'd be permanently removed. Now, the difference between the two, basically, is they can say, well, he might get better, right? So it's designed, the temporary thing is designed for, say, Donald Trump has something happen and he slips into a coma, or he trips and falls, and because of how he has been very cautious about how he's been standing and holding on to things, maybe he even just falls over at his age, right, and bumps his head, and maybe he gets a concussion, or maybe he does slip into a coma, something like that, but he's unconscious. And while he is unconscious and unresponsive, we need to have somebody with the power of the presidency. That's where the temporary thing comes into play. JD Vance could go to Congress and say, look, until he is cleared by a doctor, he's not fit. And now in that case, I think even with Donald Trump, the Republican Party would say, yeah, okay, we're going to do this, because it wouldn't be permanent, right? They could spin it to the American people and to the MAGA base. Look, he had something happen. It's only temporary. But it would be, they can use the permanent one if his dementia gets too far out of hand and they can't control him anymore. And that's the problem here, right? Are they going to do that? Are they going to use the 25th and actually go after him because of his dementia? And they might. Now, people think I'm crazy when I say that, but you got to realize as we get closer to the midterms and it becomes more and more evident that they are going to lose the midterms, which they will. Since Donald Trump became president, there has been multiple special elections. There were off-cycle elections last year, among other things, and Democrats have flipped nationwide 30 seats. The Republicans have flipped 0. And as we were talking about earlier in this podcast, the registered Republican voters were voting for the Democrat in Mar-a-Lago, or in Palm Beach, the county that represents Mar-a-Lago, right? And speaking of that election, Donald Trump likes to rail against mail-in voting, and they touched on that during this cabinet meeting. But he says he gets to vote by mail because he's the president. And while technically, yes, that should be true, because him getting down there to go vote under a normal presidency, getting back to your home district would be a problem. The dude's he's at Mar-a-Lago almost every weekend at this point. He goes home a lot, in part because I think the reason he spends so much time at Mar-a-Lago is its familiar surroundings, and it is easier to control the dementia patient in those familiar surroundings. Now, will they use the 25th? Possibly. Like I said, as you get closer to the midterms, they may decide that maybe moving on Donald Trump is the only thing that may keep them from getting utterly wiped out in the midterms, or they may do it after he costs them the House and the Senate. I mean, I'm seeing some people that we talk to quite regularly are now trying to claim that the Democrats could get as many as 57 seats in the Senate. 57. That would mean they flip 10 seats. I'm thinking they're going to be lucky to get 4, but some people are saying that they think that there could be as many as 10 that are in play, and I don't know. But if that happens, the Democrats are going to be in good position, and the Republicans are going to be wanting to make changes, right? And they may decide that now is the time to move on Donald Trump. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, one of the other things Donald Trump was railing about during this cabinet meeting, and he tried to play it off. Well, there's a company, oh, they treat me so good. I'm not going to say who it is. Less than 2 sentences later, of course, he told us he was talking about Sharpie. And he was talking about the pens. He acts like he's doing America a favor by signing everything in these Sharpies, despite the fact that it's tacky. To me, it's really tacky to sign all of these official things in big Sharpie. He said he got Sharpie to make a special White House version of their product because he couldn't hold just the stereotypical silver Sharpie in his hand, the gray Sharpie. But I think part of it has to do with he wanted to be special and have this special Sharpie. And one of the things, if you watch how he signs things anymore, it's more like he's pushing his hand across the page instead of just flowing with the wrist. It doesn't look like his signature a lot anymore. It looks like he's putting a lot of extra M's and N's. When you write a cursive P, you go down with the last stroke, but a lot of times now his final stroke goes up and he slashes through it. And the Sharpie is hiding some of that. By being bigger, it's easier for him to mask the motor control issues he is having. But he was talking about these pens, right? And he says, well, they give you all these pens to do these, to sign the bills, and they don't have any ink in them, and they barely work, and I'm just giving them away. Well, what he's actually talking about, and his brain is filling in some gaps here, but if you watch other presidents and how they sign bills, and for the longest time, it didn't make a lot of sense to me until I actually saw somebody break down and talk about it specifically as to why they do it. You'll see presidents will sign like a full, maybe one letter at a time per pen, or, they had to figure out how to break down their signature and so they could split it up by pen. And it wasn't because the pens were crap or that they didn't have any ink. The idea was this was a symbolic thing that they have been doing for decades, if not longer, is that they would sign these bills with multiple pens and they would give out the pens as souvenirs to people around them when he signed the bill. And usually you would give it to an ally in Congress, a lawmaker, and not always an ally. Maybe it could even be, if it was a good idea, it might even be somebody from the opposition party, whoever sponsored the bill, whoever brought it forward the first time. And you might also give it to, if it was something that, say, a community leader, a civilian, somebody not in politics, if they championed it, or if it was done in the name of somebody else, right? Like the Brady handgun bill. I believe that was because of a Secret Service agent who was shot by a handgun. I could be wrong on where the name came from, but I'm pretty sure it was because somebody was shot by a gun and they wanted to, honor that person. I believe it was a Secret Service agent. But anyway, and they enacted stricter background checks and things like that. It's called the Brady Bill. Well, maybe either that person, I don't remember if they survived or not, or one of their family members would be would be there for the signing, and the president would give them a pen from signing that bill. Or if it was a landmark piece of legislation, for example, when Obama signed Obamacare, it was major legislation reform. So he would sign part of his name, with multiple pens, and maybe he would keep one pen for his own personal souvenir, and he would keep one to send to his presidential library, and they would put it on display as, a museum piece, the pen that signed the Affordable Care Act, for example. But see, Donald Trump doesn't do that, and especially with his, he's never done it, even not even during his first term. He never signed with multiple Sharpies. He would always sign things once. He would do a quick, hurried signature. He didn't have the patience or the desire to learn how to do any of that. And now it's just a cover for, how bad his motor skills are getting. Beyond that, he tries to make it sound like he is doing America a big favor, and that's typical of narcissists. Well, I'm changing how this goes, but I'm doing it to help you by saving thousands of dollars on these pens. To the federal government, saving $1,000 at a time is literally like most people, whether or not they bend down to pick up that penny off the ground, and a lot of people won't anymore. the pen budget for the United States, even at $1,000 a piece for these commemorative pens, is really not that large. But Donald Trump was sure focused on it and tried to make it to be a bigger thing than it really was. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is another change that we heard about. It is being touted. Now, I believe it is starting with the 100 and going its way down into all denominations. They are taking the signature of the Treasurer of the United States off of the bills. For 165 years, there have been two signatures on all of the currency. And it has always been the current Treasurer of the United States, or the Treasurer at the time when they remade the plates, rather. They don't always change every time the Treasurer and the Secretary of the Treasury change people, but then they redesign the plate, they create a new one, and they put the signatures of the Treasurer and the Secretary of the Treasury on the bills. Well, they're taking off the signature of the Treasurer of the United States of America in favor of somebody else. And for 165 years, the person in this position has never had their signature on currency. And who is it? Three guesses, first two don't count. It's Donald Trump. They are putting Donald Trump's signature on our currency. Why? I think it's because another distraction, and it's something to placate Donald Trump. He gets to do something no other president's ever done, because no other president was ever egotistical enough to want their signature on it. And there were reasons as to why it wasn't there. But now he wants his signature there, or they're doing it for him, trying to make it a thing. That way, he gets his way, he gets his signature on something else. It's something else he can brag about, and it keeps his attention, it keeps his focus, and it keeps him easily controllable. That's the whole thing with Donald Trump. That's why they give him these prizes. That's why they talk about giving him, or Venezuela making statues, and they talk about, letting him build the ballroom, which we don't even know if that's going to be finished. They allowed him to put his name on the Kennedy Center, even though it's not actually the Kennedy Center, and that goes against legal precedent, that goes against SOP. And we're hearing at least one member of the Kennedy Center board is trying to sue to get the name taken back off and to prevent Donald Trump from closing it. But anyway, that's why they let him do all these things. And they let him talk about building an Arc de Triomphe and everything. And they even tell him, oh, yeah, it's a good idea. We should rename an airport after you. It's because it keeps him distracted. It keeps him going. And it keeps, things calm when it comes to a dementia patient. It's a way of allowing him to think he is more important than he is, so he's not dealing with the fact that he is not in his right mind. And we know he's not in his right mind because once again, he talked about the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And he talks about how they got kind of tough in the middle and they became really, really difficult at the very end of the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. He didn't actually call it the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, but it's what he was talking about. He says he took another one. And I'm going to pull it up again. And the part in the middle where he says they are getting very, very difficult. He said they involve mathematical equations. Okay. Now, this is the part where he says that was very difficult. Subtraction starting 7 subtraction starting at 50. So you start at 50 and you're supposed to subtract 7. And how many times do you come out with the right answer? And you just keep saying, okay, what is 50 minus 7? And they give you an answer. Then you take that answer. What is that minus 7? And you get points based on how many you get correct. And he says it's very difficult because it's takes mathematical equations. And he says toward the end, it gets very, very difficult that no one could pass it. Okay. Here are the last 3 questions. And you tell me how difficult they are. Similarity between. Okay. If I tell you a banana and an orange, give me something that makes them similar. And the answer for that would be fruit. Now they give you 2. Hammer and a screwdriver. Similarity, tools. Okay. A match and a lamp. And if you said source of light, you'd be correct. He says these are some of the difficult questions. And then the second to last question has to do with memory recall. Earlier in the exam, they would have given you 5 words. On this particular one I've pulled up, the 5 words are leg, cotton, school, tomato, and white. And you are asked after, I believe it is 5 minutes, you are asked to repeat those 5 words. And if you get them all right, you get points for getting them all right. If they have to give you categories to get there, you get less points. Or do they have to give you to them as multiple choice? And see what kind of points you get out of there. And then finally, the last question is about orientation. They ask you for the date, the day of the week, the place you are in when you are taking the test, and the city. And Donald Trump was talking about this, and he says it is a very difficult test that nobody could pass it. But he passed it with flying colors. Now, we've talked about it before. When you are dealing with the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, you end up telling the person, no matter how good or bad they did, you tell them they did great. You tell them they passed it. Because you don't want to cause any more stress, any more burden on the problem that they are already having, whether it's from recovering from a stroke, whether it's dementia, whether it is a severe brain injury, or what have you. You don't do that. You tell them they passed, and you let them carry on. But see, for Donald Trump, he gets told he passed, and he thinks, and he wears it like a badge of honor. So Donald Trump once again bragging about taking the very, very hard cognitive test. He called it the cognitive test. He didn't say an IQ test this time like he usually does. But this is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, or at least that's the last part of it that he was discussing. And again is bragging about having taken it and having passed it. And that is something that, it should be very worrying to the majority of Americans, because the president of the United States is being given routinely now a cognitive assessment because they are worried about his mental state. All right, that is going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I'm going to be back tomorrow with another podcast. Should be getting back on track with keeping it up to date. I want to thank you for joining me. And again, a reminder, if you have any questions, you can email me at analyticaliwon@gmail.com. There should be a link in my bio. Also, if you want to be a guest on the Analytical Iowan podcast, like the Rational Boomer does, go ahead, send me an email. We'll set up a time. We'll make it work. And I should have a lot more free time the next week or so to actually do those. So if people want to come on and we want to just have a discussion, we'll do that too. I'm probably going to be doing a live for the podcast here in one of the upcoming days as well. So I'll be keeping an eye out for a TikTok live. And maybe next week, one night, I might also do a YouTube live. If you'd like me to do it live here on YouTube, let me know. And we can set that up as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.